So, you couldn't sleep. Again, no judgment. Insomnia has existed since the Roman Empire. They just didn't have Wi-Fi to make it worse. Lucky for you, tonight's tale doesn't require alertness, just a soft pillow and a mildly questionable sense of curiosity. Like this sort of strange bedtime ritual? Nudge the like button and maybe subscribe if you keep finding yourself here at 2 a.m. Also, let me know where you're listening from and how far past midnight you've gone. Bonus points if you're under a blanket fort. Okay, deep breath, screen dimmed. Let's tiptoe into a piece of the past they definitely didn't cover in school. You wake up here, and by here I mean flat on your side, in what passes for an alleyway, though it's mostly just a gap between two leaning structures held together by prayer and pigeon droppings. The ground beneath you is neither flat nor soft, a chaotic mosaic of cobblestones, mud, and something vaguely sticky that might be ale, might be bile, might be both. You've learned not to investigate. Your bed, and I use that word the way one might use meal for 3 peas on a pewter plate, is a woven mat made of reeds that once dreamt of floating gracefully on a river. Now they sag, damp and defeated, pressed to your skin through a thin layer of rags that only vaguely resemble clothing. There is no pillow. There is a boot near your head, though it is not yours. It may not even belong to a person. The first sensation of the day is not peace. It is cold. Not the crisp, romantic kind of cold you might associate with a snowy postcard or a ski resort. No, this cold is personal. It finds the places between your ribs. It knows your weaknesses. It is in your bones. The kind of cold that settles into your marrow overnight like a lodger who won't pay rent and eats all your turnips. Your body aches. This is not unusual. You have slept, if one could call it that, in the fetal position for warmth, and your spine is currently forming what medieval scholars might call an architectural concern. Your neck crackles when you turn your head. Your hip, your good one, has given up diplomacy with the stone beneath it and declared war. There is movement. A gentle tugging at your sleeve. You blearily open one eye. A rat, no, your rat, is checking if you're dead again. His name is Oswald. You've never officially adopted him, but he's lived in the folds of your blanket for the last 8 nights, and he only bites you when startled. You've had worse roommates. A rooster crows in the distance, because of course it does, the universal signal that today will be no better than yesterday. And then comes the second sensation of the day. Pain. Your stomach reminds you that you ate something yesterday. Bread, probably, or what you were told was bread. It crunched in places it shouldn't. It had a smell that whispered regret. But it was calories, and calories are what keep you upright and only mostly miserable. You inhale slowly. The morning air is not fresh, not even close. It's a rich soup of chamber pot runoff, chimney soot, livestock, and the heady perfume of humanity doing its best without deodorant. Somewhere, someone is already frying something in rancid animal fat. Your nose wrinkles. Breakfast, medieval style. Start with nausea. Your fingers find your face and confirm, yes, you still have most of it. Your skin is rough, not from exfoliation, but from the wind and dust and the fact that your soap is a lie made from ashes and animal parts. You itch in several places. You try not to think about what might be causing it. Still, you're awake, technically, which is both a blessing and a curse in equal measure. The sky above you is gray in that special, endlessly oppressive way medieval skies often are. Not stormy, not clear, just a damp blanket laid over the world. You can hear the town stirring, cartwheels creak, someone somewhere is already yelling about fish. A bell tolls, maybe for mass, maybe for a funeral. Really, who can tell? Your bones pop as you sit up. Your blanket, 2 stitched-together sacks, falls off your shoulders with all the elegance of wet laundry. You pull it tighter anyway, shivering. Your shoes sit nearby, uneven and partially filled with straw. You stare at them for a moment, weighing your options. Today, perhaps, is a barefoot day. Your soles will not thank you, but your toes are already numb, so they don't get a vote. Your surroundings come into sharper focus. The alley where you sleep is a prime bit of real estate, meaning it's not actively flooding at the moment. It's flanked by 2 buildings that lean inward as though conspiring about how best to collapse on you. One wall is green with moss, the other with suspicion. A small rivulet of liquid runs past you, carrying twigs, dirt, and something pale that you hope is not a finger. There's movement near your feet. A chicken clucks its way past, pausing to regard you with a suspicious eye. You nod politely. It struts on. You've had worse encounters with poultry. Across the way, another body stirs. Margot, perhaps, or the man who smells like fish and regret. There's a quiet community here, in the liminal space between commerce and waste. You don't know most names, but you know the coughs, the silhouettes, the shared grumbles in the night. And then finally, the third sensation of the day arrives. Obligation. You must move. Not because anyone expects anything of you, heavens no, but because if you remain too long in this spot, someone will likely pee on it. Again, you grunt, standing slowly. Your joints sound like a xylophone played with resentment. You stretch, but it's mostly ceremonial. There's no limber anymore, just less stiff than moments ago. You retrieve your satchel. Not that it contains anything of value, but you've stitched it enough times that it's earned your affection. Inside, one wooden spoon, a broken comb, a piece of cloth that used to be a sock, and a lucky pebble that isn't lucky but is round enough to feel nice in your hand. You carry your history in scraps. The day begins. There is no sun to greet you. No coffee, no hot water, no shower unless you count the drizzle that may or may not be urine-based. But you're here. Upright. Awake. It's more than many can say. And as your feet hit the street, one shoed, one wrapped in cloth and quiet desperation, you begin to shuffle toward whatever the day holds. Perhaps a crust. Perhaps a coin. Perhaps someone will drop a hunk of cheese and not notice. You're a beggar in a medieval town. You exist in the margins, the footnotes of history. But today, you are alive. For now. The first sound you hear today, aside from the gentle muttering of your own knees trying to abandon your body, is a wet slap. Something nearby has hit the cobblestones with a noise that only two things make. A fish or something worse. You don't investigate. Instead, you rise. Or attempt to. Because in the medieval world, standing up isn't a single action. It's a multi-phase event that begins with regret, continues through spinal negotiation, and concludes with a triumphant grunt that probably draws the attention of the pigeons. You're not entirely sure what time it is, but the light in the alley has taken on that damp pewter hue that means congratulations, it's morning. Prepare to suffer. There's no sunbeam slipping romantically through a wooden shutter. There's just fog. Cold fog. The kind of fog that clings to you like guilt and settles in your joints like a long-lost debt collector. As you shuffle toward what you think is upright, you hear it. The familiar, unmistakable splash of a chamber pot being emptied from an upstairs window. You pause mid-rise. You don't even look up. You've learned that lesson before. It hits the ground several feet from you with the enthusiasm of someone who eats a lot of turnips and drinks weak ale. A small mercy. You'll take it. Congratulations, you are vertical. That means it's time for the morning ritual. Not prayer, though that may come later if you're feeling desperate or delusional, but the actual business of preparing yourself to face the world in all your glory. By which I mean, brushing off the dead leaves stuck to your clothes, scratching yourself in places that were bitten overnight, and trying to remember if today is market day or hang the thieves' day. You stretch, but your muscles are confused. They don't remember agreeing to this. You reach for the wall to steady yourself and immediately pull back. It's wet. It shouldn't be. It hasn't rained. You decide to move on and not let the mystery consume you. As you shuffle forward, your bare foot finds something soft and meaty. You freeze. A slow glance down reveals a pig's ear. Possibly fresh, possibly from this century, possibly something you might attempt to trade for bread later. You pick it up. You pocket it. In this economy, everything is potentially edible or valuable. Sometimes both. Further up the alley, the rest of the street begins its song, a discordant symphony of coughing, cartwheels, babies screaming, pigs screaming, women screaming at babies and pigs, and the creak of wood as doors open and someone somewhere begins beating a rug that hasn't been cleaned since the last crusade. You perform your ablutions. This consists of dipping your hands into the town's communal water trough, which is generously described as clear-ish and more accurately described as a broth of possibilities. You splash it on your face. It's cold enough to make you question your commitment to consciousness. You rub your teeth with a finger and a pinch of ashes. They feel slightly less fuzzy. You spit. It lands on your foot. You sigh. Next, the delicate task of inspecting yourself for parasites. You scratch your scalp. Lice, the regulars. You squish one between your fingernails and mutter a prayer. Not for it, for yourself. You lift your tunic slightly and inspect the bites. They're red but not infected. Yet, you scratch anyway. It's meditative, a reminder that you're still alive enough to itch. Something brushes against your ankle. It is not Oswald. You yelp and jump, a full 2 inches off the ground, a personal record, and discover it was a dog. It gives you a look of mild interest, then sniffs your foot, decides you're beneath its standards, and trots off to do important canine business, such as peeing on a nobleman's doorstep. You stagger toward the main street. Each step is an adventure. The cobblestones are slick. The frost is real. The smell, oh the smell. There is an open sewer in the center of the street, a literal ditch, running parallel to the foot traffic in which waste flows. Human, animal, possibly spiritual. Some call it the Great Stink. You call it home adjacent. It bubbles cheerfully. You pass by a baker's stall. It smells like heaven if heaven were slightly burnt and full of yeast. Your stomach howls. The baker eyes you with suspicion. You stare at the crumbs near his feet. He notices. He kicks them into the gutter. Fair enough. You continue your ritual walk, navigating puddles, children fighting with sticks, and someone loudly evangelizing about the sin of sneezing before sunrise. He wears a robe and no shoes. You feel briefly superior. You have shoes, technically, even if one is mostly just an idea wrapped in string. As you pass by a line of carts being unloaded, a man steps backward and nearly brains you with a turnip. You dodge it like a hero. He doesn't notice. You consider stealing one, but you're too slow, and anyway, theft this early would be greedy. Instead, you find your way to a quieter corner. There, near the butcher's wall, which smells aggressively of Tuesday's meat, you find a familiar bucket. It's mostly water, mostly frozen, but it's been used by enough people this morning that it now contains a sort of primitive broth. You dunk your head into it anyway. The shock of it resets your nervous system. You pull back, gasping. Now you're awake. Wet but awake. You wring out your hair, such as it is, and pat your face dry with the inside of your sleeve. It does not absorb, it smears. You accept this. The sky has brightened, but not in a helpful way. The light now reveals things you'd rather not see. Like the open sore on your hand, or the rat chewing on a discarded boot with a look of entrepreneurial optimism. As you walk, you nod to familiar faces. There's Greta, who coughs like a haunted bellows. There's Big Tom, who may or may not have 2 glass eyes. It's hard to tell, as he never blinks. There's the man who swears he's royalty but also eats rocks. They nod back, or twitch, or don't. Social interaction? Medieval style. And then comes the final act of the ritual. Choosing your spot. Where to station yourself today for optimal begging potential. You study the street like a seasoned hawker. Too close to the tanner? Smells unbearable. Too close to the apothecary? Risk getting trampled by rich folk with boils. Near the church? Always a winner. Guilt is the most reliable currency. You choose your place and settle in. Your morning ritual is complete. You are scrubbed-ish, you are standing, you are itchy, cold, and alive. And you are ready for whatever grim delight the world intends to throw at your already aching face. Let's talk about home. Not the kind with scented candles, matching hand towels, or functional roofing. No, your house, if you even have one, is less cozy sanctuary and more accidental shelter, accidentally shared with vermin. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we must define what even qualifies as housing in your charming medieval context. And the answer is simple: walls. Sometimes. Your particular structure, the one you're occasionally allowed to sleep in when its rightful inhabitant has had too much ale or too much plague, is a single-room tenement wedged between a tannery and what you suspect used to be a grain shop, but now mostly functions as a bird toilet. From the outside, it resembles a collapsing sandwich made from timber, sadness, and centuries of structural anxiety. The wooden beams are warped, swollen from generations of exposure to rain and regret. They creak, even in still air. The plaster between them is made from wattle and daub, a delightful cocktail of mud, straw, and the liberal inclusion of animal dung, applied with whatever tools were available, trowels, hands, or screaming children. Inside it is neither warm nor dry. The thatched roof above your head performs what can best be described as a suggestion of coverage. Gaps between the reeds allow in rain, snow, birds, and last week, A very bold cat who defecated on your only blanket and left without tipping. The walls sweat. Yes, they perspire. Moisture seeps in and out of the daub like it's gasping for help. In winter, ice forms along the inner surface, creating a glistening horror that you occasionally scrape off and consider using as drinking water. You tried it once, you've learned. There is one window. It does not open, because it is made of oiled parchment, not glass. Glass is for people who don't live next to tanneries and refer to their spoons as the good one. The parchment allows in some light, but mostly filters it through layers of grime, giving the room a permanent jaundiced hue. Everything inside looks slightly sick. Fitting, really. The floor is dirt, and when I say dirt, I mean mud. And when I say mud, I mean mud plus time. This isn't soil that was tracked in. This is the floor. Packed earth, trampled smooth over generations, mixed with ashes, grease, hair, slop, blood, and the mysterious jelly that collects in corners and dares you to ask questions. It's said that some wealthier homes scatter straw or rushes across their floors to absorb the mess and offer a touch of softness. You do not live in one of those homes. Your floor features straw only when it blows in accidentally, or when your rat co-tenant, Oswald, drags in a fresh batch for his nest. You're thinking of charging him rent. He won't pay. Let's pivot briefly to hygiene. There is no soap. There is no bath. There is no hot water unless you light a fire, and lighting a fire requires fuel, and fuel costs money, and money is something you use to not die. So your cleanliness is maintained with a time-honored tradition. The once-over with a wet rag and some inner denial. Your clothes, which double as pajamas, bedding, and handkerchiefs, have never been washed. They have been rinsed, occasionally, in the same stream where the local butcher discards viscera. You are comforted only by the fact that everyone smells, and therefore no one notices. You personally smell like a stew made of mildew, foot, and faint hopelessness. But your neighbor smells worse. She has a yeast infection of the foot, so you win. Parasites? Of course. They are the most loyal inhabitants of your home. Let's catalog them, shall we? Fleas. Ubiquitous. You feel them before you see them. Their bites swell into little itchy red monuments to suffering. They live in your blanket, your clothes, your mattress, if you have one, and your dreams. You once tried to crush them all by rolling in ash. It made you less biteable. Also, less welcome in church. Lice, your scalp's closest companions. They live in your hair and breed with a dedication most nobles can only envy. You sometimes comb them out with a needle. Other times, you just name them. Bedbugs, small, flat, and fueled by your misery. You know they're around because you wake up with trails of bites like someone's been mapping a tiny cartographic revenge mission on your skin. You scratch, they remain. Mites, invisible but real. You once heard that monks used to burn their bedding weekly to deal with them. You don't have the bedding, or the fire, or the monk, so you make peace with the crawling sensation. Rats, bold, large, often mistaken for dogs in dim light. Oswald is one of the better ones. He minds his business, eats the crumbs you leave, and only bites you when startled. Other rats are less polite. You once saw one drag off a whole turnip. You cheered. Cockroaches. They don't fear you. Why would they? You once tried to squash one with your boot. It disappeared and reappeared inside your boot the next morning. You wore a different shoe. The building is infested. You are infested. The infested have infested the infestation. At night you sometimes hear the scratching, not just from the creatures in your home, but from the walls themselves. They shift, settle, moan. Occasionally a timber groans with what you pray is just pressure and not the beginning of a slow terminal collapse. One night the ceiling dripped blood. You didn't look up, because looking up implies hope. Instead you moved 2 feet to the left and resumed scratching at your ankle. But let us not forget the human neighbors. Your wall is shared with 3 other families, each of them noisy, none of them considerate. The man next door snores like a dying ox and weeps loudly every Wednesday. The woman below you is a midwife who often screams, not in labor, just in general. The people upstairs have goats, indoors. And then there's the man in the attic, if you can call a space that small an attic, who believes he's a bird. He coos, at dawn, loudly. You hate him, but you respect his consistency. Still, you call this place shelter, because it blocks the wind. Sometimes, because it doesn't always leak, because it has 4 sides, and that's more than the alley has. You once tried to improve things. You hung a bit of cloth over the hole in the wall. It fell. You tried to nail it up. You dropped the nail. It rolled under the cot. You never saw it again. That was the last time you attempted decor. And so, you exist. In this hut, this hovel, this architectural shrug of a dwelling. You do not love it, but you fear what comes after it more. Because without walls, even these, warped and worm-eaten, you're fair game. For cold, for thieves, for wolves, for the town constable who delights in moving along the unsheltered with his favorite stick. This place, it's bad, but it's yours. For now. You curl up on your straw pile. Oswald curls at your feet. Something larger skitters nearby, but you're too tired to care. And as the moonlight filters through the crusty parchment window, you sigh. Home, sweet home. The good news? It's morning and you're still alive. The bad news? So is your hunger. It begins quietly, as it always does. A gentle, gnawing hollowness just beneath your ribs. Not sharp, not dramatic, more like a whispering ghost in your gut. But soon, that whisper swells into a roar and your stomach begins to protest its empty condition with long, echoing growls that sound eerily like distant thunder, or more specifically, like a dog being denied bacon. Except, of course, there is no bacon. Not for you. Your breakfast today, as with most days, is a choose-your-own-suffering adventure, with the options ranging from edible, technically, to sentient and hostile. There's no menu, there is no chef, there's barely even a plate. But you do have something. You pull it from your satchel like it's a treasure, and in this timeline it is a crust, not bread. No, this is what happens to bread when it forgets its purpose. It's hard, cracked, vaguely trapezoidal, and the color of aged regret. It smells faintly of mildew and strongly of old flour. You knock it against a rock, partly to test for freshness, partly to make sure it isn't already occupied by weevils. It makes a dull thunk. You bite into it anyway. The first sensation is pressure. The second is heat. Not from the bread, of course, but from the effort of your jaw attempting to fracture this medieval meteorite. You chew, slowly, carefully. You do not want to lose another tooth this week. Dental care here consists mostly of hoping your teeth die in a less dramatic fashion than you do. The taste? Imagine sawdust. Now imagine that sawdust has gone on a very long emotional journey. Now imagine you're eating its memoir. Still, it's fuel, sort of. You chew and chew and chew long past the point of pleasure. Your jaw muscles begin to cramp. You pause to massage your face with both hands, as if trying to coax yourself into finishing this ordeal. And you do. Because hunger is persuasive. Halfway through, you discover a bonus, a beetle. Black, shiny, slightly confused. It waves a leg at you, as if to say, please reconsider. You do not. The beetle, ironically, adds texture and protein, which is more than you can say for the bread. You crunch through it with grim satisfaction, ignoring the way its tiny legs briefly resist. Your drink? Water. But not the clear, crisp, glacial fantasy you might know. No, your water comes from a bucket, which comes from a trough, which collects runoff, which also collects leaves, feathers, the occasional tadpole, and always, always, a hint of something green and stringy. You squint into the wooden cup you keep tied to your belt with a bit of twine. Something swims. You sip from the other side. It's cold, which is nice. It also tastes like bark and sadness, which is not. Still, it moistens the bread-turned boulder in your mouth enough to finish the job. You swallow. It scrapes all the way down. Breakfast, as they say, is the most important meal of the day. Though in your case, it is more of an opening negotiation with death. On rare days, you may have access to a gruel. Ah yes, gruel. That delightful medieval porridge made from oats, barley, or whatever grain is available, overcooked in water until it achieves the exact consistency of regret. If you're lucky, there's a bit of salt. If you're very lucky, no one sneezed in it. Today is not one of those days. But you can imagine it. And so you do. You picture the thin, beige slurry steaming in a cracked wooden bowl, a spoon, more splinter than utensil, scraping the bottom. You imagine the bland, sticky heat coating your tongue. You imagine finishing it. You imagine the moment of warmth it brings, however brief, before it cools and becomes something you could use to patch a leaking roof. If you're truly desperate, and let's not kid ourselves, you usually are, you might scavenge from the waste bins behind the alehouse. The term bin here is generous. It's really a barrel tipped sideways, filled with bones, rinds, bits of bread crusts, and things unidentifiable even by the drunk who tossed them in. But if you dig carefully, preferably with a stick, you might find something worth chewing. Yesterday, for example, you scored half a pickle. Slightly gray, yes, but it still had pickle energy. It even twitched your salivary glands awake, which was frankly more excitement than your mouth had seen in weeks. Today, however, the bin is empty. Someone beat you to it. Probably Tom. He's quicker now that he has 2 shoes. You quietly curse his fashion upgrade and move on. Let's not forget what the market might offer. Ah, the market. A place of tantalizing aromas where roasted meat rotates on spits you will never touch and fruit glistens on carts you may never approach. You drift through like a ghost, trailing your nose after smells you can't afford. Sometimes you stand very still next to the fishmonger, hoping for a dropped herring. Once it worked. You caught it before it hit the ground. A magnificent moment, until you realized it had already been sucked on by a cat. You ate it anyway. Desperate times. If you're near a monastery and you're clever, you might line up with the other beggars and hope for alms, bits of bread, thin broth, or if the monks are in a particularly charitable mood, a wedge of old cheese that smells like despair. It crumbles in your fingers, it fuses to your molars, it haunts you in the night. Still, calories. Modern nutritionists would call your diet problematic. You call it functional-ish. You have no concept of vitamins. Fiber is incidental. Iron is something in the black pot you once licked. Scurvy? That's just tooth sadness. Constipation? That's Tuesday or Wednesday, depending. Sometimes you dream of feasts, long tables groaning under roasted meats, dense breads, butter, honey, pies steaming with fruit you've never even seen. You wake with drool crusted to your cheek and a pang in your heart, because you know that even in dreams you are only ever allowed to watch the feast. Still, you eat, because not eating is a luxury. Hunger isn't a rare visitor. It's a permanent roommate, louder than Oswald, messier than the lice, and harder to ignore than your own complaints. You eat what doesn't move, and sometimes what does. You eat things that used to be food, things pretending to be food, and things that actively fight back. Because this is breakfast. And in the Middle Ages, breakfast doesn't fill you, it doesn't please you, it doesn't comfort you. It simply allows you to not die for another few hours. And that, really, is the most you can ask for. Now that you've eaten your splinter-crusted beetle bread and sipped something that legally qualifies as water but spiritually resembles pawn gossip, it's time for the next cruel medieval ritual, getting dressed. Technically, you are already clothed. But this isn't about dignity. This is about survival. You must layer up, or at least give the appearance of layering, before you step fully into the day's public humiliation. Let's take inventory of your wardrobe. First, the tunic. Ah, yes, the tunic. A word that once described a garment worn by Roman citizens with status and power. Yours, however, is a rectangle of roughly stitched sackcloth, cinched at the waist with a piece of twine that previously lived a dignified life restraining a pig. The cloth is the color of moral compromise, somewhere between beige dirt and something you regret touching in the dark. It itches. It always itches. You've tried rubbing grease into it to soften the fibers. It just made it smell like boiled fat, which attracted a goose, which bit you. Twice. You pull it over your head with the same care one might use to remove a bandage from a healing wound. Very slowly, very carefully, and with the understanding that this will not end well. The collar has collapsed into a permanent crinkle. The hem is uneven. One sleeve is shorter than the other. It gives the impression that you've either been mauled or are halfway through molting. Next, your hose. Hose in theory should be snug-fitting leg coverings, crafted from fine wool and tailored to shape the leg like a supple second skin. In your reality, your hose are 2 misshapen tubes that may have once belonged to a now extinct species of sock. They bag at the knees, gape at the calves, and pinch aggressively at the thighs. One is greenish-gray. The other is a pale, questionable brown. You pull them up one at a time while seated on a rock, grunting softly like an old mule trying to stretch. There are holes. So many holes. Some you've patched, some you've simply started ignoring. A breeze finds your kneecap and you whimper. Now, shoes. Let us pause here. Your shoes, and again we're being generous, are not a matched pair. One is a leather turnshoe, its sole as thin as parchment, the heel flapping like a gossip's jaw. The other is more of a suggestion than a shoe, A flattened bundle of cloth tied with twine and fortified with a thin piece of wood, possibly taken from someone's door. You call it lefty. They smell. Oh, how they smell, like boiled squirrel and wet regret. You slide your foot into the turnshoe, wincing as the damp leather clings to your heel like a cold tongue. You shove your other foot into lefty and secure the twine, which immediately snaps. You retie it. It snaps again. You curse in a dialect no one has spoken in 100 years. The rat that lives under your sleeping mat hisses in appreciation. You are now clothed. But wait, you nearly forgot your outer tunic, a heavier overlayer made of rough wool. It is stained. With what? Don't ask. Some of it is yours. Some of it might not be. You throw it over your shoulders and feel its damp weight settle onto your bones like a resentful ghost. Around your waist you tie your rope belt, a frayed length of hemp that also serves as your toolbox napkin weapon and, on rare occasions, dental floss. It holds your satchel, contents spoon cloth pebble, your wooden cup, and, crucially, your hood. Ah, the hood. A conical scrap of wool with an attached shoulder cape, known grandly as a liripeep, which sounds like a musical instrument but smells like onions and sin. The liripipe, that long trailing tail, is frayed, torn, and has been used for everything from swatting flies to wiping your nose. You pull it over your greasy hair and let the tail dangle like a limp accusation behind you. You are now fully dressed, and yet, somehow, still indecent. Your clothing offers the illusion of warmth, the sensation of constant dampness, and a faint aroma that follows you like an ex-girlfriend with unresolved feelings. If someone stands downwind, they will smell everything you've done in the past week, and possibly what you've eaten, touched, and regretted. Occasionally, when the wind shifts, you can smell it too. You sigh. There's no concept of laundry here, not in any way you'd understand. Washing your clothes means soaking them in a stream, beating them against a rock, and hoping the lice don't simply hunker down and evolve. Soap, if you're lucky, someone with pig fat and wood ash might let you rub a sliver of lye into your tunic. The experience is akin to scrubbing with acid and shame. But the worst part, clothes in the Middle Ages are expensive. Not for the lords and ladies, obviously. They're off in their doublets and silk, changing twice a day, draped in embroidery and smugness. But for you, each item is irreplaceable. If your tunic rips, you stitch it. If your hose unravel, you wrap them in linen. If your shoe disintegrates, you mourn. No one is giving you more. Clothing is labor, it's trade, it's inheritance. You once knew a man who passed down his cloak like a family heirloom. When it finally fell apart, he used the pieces to line his coffin. Practical to the bitter end. As you shuffle toward the town square, wrapped in damp wool, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in a puddle. You blink. You look like, well, if a scarecrow mated with a compost heap and then went through a painful breakup. You adjust your liripipe. It doesn't help. Still, you straighten up. There is dignity in survival. There is courage in wearing the same tunic every day and pretending you meant to. And there is, somewhere in all this filth and fraying fabric, a human being just trying to make it through another miserable, glorious, splinter-filled day. You take a deep breath, you gag, you move on. At least you're dressed, technically. You know what's worse than waking up sore, eating a rock disguised as bread, and wrapping yourself in wool that smells like emotional damage? Working after all that. There's a popular medieval saying, "He who does not work shall not eat." To which you often mutter, "Then I should be skinny and dead already." But alas, you are neither. Because as long as you have bones that creak and fingers that mostly bend in the right direction, someone, somewhere, has a task to offer you. And by offer, we of course mean demand, with threats and contempt. Because you, dear friend, are the bottom rung of a ladder that has no bottom. You are a beggar, yes, but you're also an opportunist, a drifter, a professional in the lucrative trade of whatever no one else wants to do. And today, you are a laborer. That term sounds noble. It is not. It is the medieval equivalent of, please ruin your spine in exchange for a turnip and a grunt. Your task this morning is moving night soil. Let's translate that. Night soil is a poetic euphemism, the kind of term that dances delicately around the truth. The truth being, you are hauling buckets of human waste. From houses, from inns, from public privies, you're the one brave, unlucky soul entrusted with collecting the medieval town's, let's call it leftovers. You arrive at your assignment site, a narrow street flanked by leaning houses that seem surprised they're still standing. Outside each, there's a wooden bucket filled to various degrees of horror. The scent is not subtle. It hits you in the chest, then loops back around to insult your eyes. You pause. You breathe through your mouth. This does not help. Your boss today is a man named Gert, who has 3 teeth and a booming voice that suggests he once tried to auction off the concept of personal boundaries. He gestures toward the buckets with a toothy grin. "Don't spill none," he says, knowing full well that spillage is inevitable. You lift the first one. It's heavy in the way that only liquid nightmares can be. The sloshing inside is audible, sentient, and judgmental. You carry it to the cart, a wooden plank on wheels, sticky from years of abuse, and tip it in. You repeat this process 20 more times. Each bucket is a unique sensory experience. Some are mostly liquid. Some contain solids that defy geometry. One has a sock in it. One appears to be boiling. You do not ask questions. You do not look directly inside. You hum softly to yourself, because if you don't, your soul will try to escape your body through your ears. The reward for this labor? A coin. Not a shiny coin. Not one you can bite and impress the locals with. No, this is a battered, thin disc that may have once been currency, but now mostly functions as a polite way to say, "You didn't die, here's proof." You pocket it, and you move on. Gert, in his infinite generosity, offers you a second task. It pays half a coin, which means you'll be paid eventually, maybe, if the wind is favorable and Gert doesn't forget who you are. This next job? Hauling stones for the mason. That sounds easy. It is not. The stones are not shaped for comfort. They are jagged. They are heavy. They are stacked in a pile that mocks you. You are expected to carry them, one by one, to the far end of town, where a wall is being built. A wall you will never use for a building you will never enter. You hoist the first stone onto your shoulder. It presses into your collarbone like a personal grudge. You stagger. You wobble. You walk. The path is uneven. The mud sucks at your feet like it's trying to reclaim you. Children laugh at you as you pass. A dog follows you for 3 streets, waiting for you to drop something edible. You do not. By the 5th trip, your back feels like it's hosting a protest. Your fingers cramp. You have lost feeling in your left arm. The mason says nothing, just nods at the pile like it's your destiny. You want to scream. Instead, you cough. It echoes off the stone and makes you feel momentarily powerful. Around noon, you get a break. Break, here, means you collapse against a wall and eat a chunk of something that might be cheese. The cheese is hard. It has mold. You scrape it off with a twig. You bite. It crumbles. A fly lands on it. You eat it anyway. Then you're back at it. This time, Gert has a new idea, something light for the afternoon. He hands you a broom made of twigs tied with twine. You are to sweep the market square. There's a logic to this. That logic is madness. The square is covered in everything. Straw, mud, chicken feathers, urine, apple cores, vomit, fish bones, and the occasional broken tooth. Your broom is about as effective as brushing your teeth with a pine cone. But you sweep anyway. Not because it's working, but because someone is watching. The town reeve. A man whose favorite hobby is pretending the street isn't a biological hazard and blaming the poor for existing too visibly. You make a show of sweeping. He nods. You hate him. It begins to drizzle. The drizzle turns the dirt into sludge. The broom disintegrates. You keep moving it back and forth anyway because the gesture has become symbolic. Your entire existence is symbolic. By the time the sun begins to fade behind the cloud-thick horizon, your body is a symphony of aches. Your hands are raw. Your tunic smells worse than before, something you didn't think possible. Your feet squelch in your shoes. Your stomach has already begun its next protest. But you worked. You labored. You bent your spine, ground your teeth, and offered your hours to the void. And for this, you are given another coin, or at least a coin-shaped object with a hole in it. You nod. You mumble thanks. You don't mean it. Gert wanders off. The reeve sneers in your direction. A pigeon poops on your hood. And you smile. Because tomorrow, you might not get this lucky. Tomorrow, the work might involve a dead cow, or a chimney, or holding torches for a public execution while someone throws cabbage at you. Today was easy. And if that's not terrifying, I don't know what is. You don't plan on getting sick in the Middle Ages. That would require a level of optimism you can no longer afford. But here you are anyway. It starts, as these things often do, with a cough. Just a tickle, really. A light rasp in the chest that shows up while you're hauling stones or sweeping goose droppings into a corner the wind keeps undoing. You try to ignore it. You try to chew a bit of pine resin. You even try humming, as if you could soothe your own lungs with a musical placebo. But the cough stays. Then comes the fever. It begins as a subtle warmth behind your eyes. Then by sundown, you're sweating through your blanket, which you'll recall is mostly burlap and flea carcasses. You shiver. You overheat. You vomit once, possibly twice. It's hard to tell because the nausea and hunger feel identical now. Your neighbors notice, not out of concern. This is the Middle Ages. Concern is a currency no one has enough of. No, they notice because your coughing is too loud, and loudness invites suspicion. Plague? Possibly. Demonic possession? Also possible. Gluttony? Unlikely, but you did eat 2 beetles yesterday and people are jealous. Still, they send word to someone who might help. And that someone arrives just before dawn. The local barber surgeon. Yes, the barber and the surgeon. Same man. One title, one terrifying apron. His name is Gervais. He smells of pickled onions and wet wool. His fingers are stained red, not metaphorically, but literally, and he carries with him a small wooden case that creaks open like a crypt to reveal an arsenal of despair. Knives, hooks, threads, a hammer, a suspiciously curved spoon, and of course, a pouch of leeches. Gervais greets you with a grunt. He touches your forehead with the back of his hand and nods solemnly, as if confirming something inevitable. He says, "Your humors are unbalanced." You do not know what this means. No one does. But it's a phrase with power, like, "We're out of wine," or "The bishop is watching." He pulls out his leeches. They writhe. You try not to. He places them on your chest and neck, whispering something in Latin, or possibly fake Latin. It's hard to tell. The leeches, for their part, are delighted. They latch on and begin their ancient, legally questionable therapy session. You lie still, letting them feed. After 15 minutes, Gervais removes them and studies their bloated bodies like a sommelier examining a cork. He grunts again, as if the leeches have confirmed his diagnosis. He then offers you his next treatment, bloodletting. He unsheathes a blade the size of your forearm and explains gently that too much blood is the cause of most ailments. Fever? Blood. Dizziness? Blood. Broken toe? Probably blood. You ask, meekly, if maybe rest and water might help. He laughs. He makes a small cut in your forearm. It stings. The blood drips into a bowl. He watches it with fascination, as if your hemoglobin is trying to communicate stock tips. After a pint or so, he bandages you with a cloth that smells like vinegar and sadness. Next comes the herbs. Gervais presents you with a foul-smelling poultice made from onion, garlic, pig bile, and something he claims is saint spit. He smears it across your chest with all the delicacy of a man churning butter with his fists. You gag. He tells you this will draw out the illness. You ask what happens if it doesn't. He shrugs. Before leaving, he gives you instructions. Drink nettle tea boiled in rainwater, filtered through a virgin's shawl. Sleep facing east. Don't eat cabbage for 3 days. And most importantly, pray. You thank him. He charges you 3 coins. You give him 2 buttons and a small beetle. He accepts. You are left lying in a pool of your own sweat, wrapped in a blanket that now reeks of onion and failure. The leeches have left tiny bite marks that itch. Your arm throbs. Your fever has not broken, but your neighbors are satisfied. They heard you got treated, which means you're no longer a threat. No plague, just blood imbalance, just sin in the lungs, just medieval things. By evening, your fever spikes again. You begin hallucinating. You see a saint in the corner. She disapproves of your hygiene. You see Oswald the rat wearing a crown. He blesses you with a crumb. You see Gervais again, but he's riding a goat and shouting about the dangers of left-handed peasants. You wake up, hours later, drenched and sore, but alive. In your world, medicine doesn't cure. It delays, it distracts, it makes you bleed until you forget what hurt in the first place. And sometimes, rarely, you get better, which means the treatment worked. Obviously. Later that week, your cough fades, not because of the leeches, or the pig bile, or the bloodletting, but probably because your immune system, such as it is, just got bored and moved on. You survive. Gervais hears of your recovery. He takes full credit. He adds you to his list of successful interventions, right between man with sprained toe who died anyway, and woman whose pimple was actually a bee. As a gift, he offers you a salve for future illness. You ask what's in it. He whispers, mostly chalk. You nod. You accept. Because in this timeline, medicine is not about evidence. It's about hope, guts, and possibly demons. And if none of that works, you die. Neatly, quietly, without antibiotics, anesthesia, or antiseptic. Possibly buried in the wrong grave. Possibly mistaken for someone else, but today you've been cured. Congratulations. The sun begins to sag across the sky like a tired drunk leaning against a tavern wall, and you realize with a familiar dread, it's time to eat again. Or more accurately, time to make a decision that vaguely resembles eating, using whatever resources remain, physical, emotional, or rodent-based. Dinner, supper, the evening meal, call it what you like. It will still betray you. Your stomach, having been insulted earlier by the tragic breakfast of brittle bread and beetle protein, is now sending polite but increasingly urgent notifications up your esophagus. You try to ignore them. You fail. You begin the sacred evening ritual of scavenging. First, you return to the baker's alley. You know better than to go through the front door. You approach the back, where buckets of crusts and ashes accumulate like offerings to a god who demands indigestion. You find something, a heel of bread, stale, dry, slightly mold-flecked. You sniff. It smells of yeast and dust and old hands. You eat it anyway. Mold is penicillin in the future, you tell yourself. One bite in, your gums bleed slightly. The crust is as hard as last rites. Next, you move toward the tavern. The tavern is warm, inviting, full of laughter, clinking mugs, and people who don't know your name but would still throw a chicken bone in your general direction out of drunken pity. This is your chance. You loiter near the doorway, staring longingly at the warm hearth and greasy platters. You breathe in the thick scent of boiled meat and old ale, an aroma both erotic and violent. A man stumbles out. He drops something, a chunk of gristle, or possibly bread soaked in stew. You pounce. You snatch it from the dirt before the dog can. The dog snarls. You snarl back. You win. You sit on a rock, savoring the spoil like a king on a throne made of moss and sadness. It's warm. It's chewy. It's meat adjacent. Could be lamb, could be pigeon, could be rat, could be your old friend, Bernard the rat. You decide not to think about it. But oh, the texture. Tough, stringy, cooked into submission, but still clinging to life. You gnaw at it with the determination of a condemned soul trying to taste memory. Bits of cartilage crunch between your molars like tiny secrets. You swallow before your brain can object. There's something tangy, possibly ale, possibly sweat, possibly despair. Still, you eat. Nearby, someone retches in a gutter. You nod in solidarity. Now comes the vegetable course, assuming you interpret vegetable broadly enough to include turnip skins and cabbage water. You happen upon a discarded bowl left behind by someone wealthier but not smarter. There's a film of something at the bottom. You tip it into your mouth. It's cold, it's sour, it's technically food. A single boiled pea rolls into your hand. You stare at it, awed, a miracle, a sphere of potential. You pop it into your mouth and chew so slowly it could be a religious experience, then dessert. Not really, but in the crack between two barrels you find half a dried fig someone dropped. It's wrinkled, hardened, covered in a fine layer of something white that might be sugar, or mold, or medieval fairy dust. You dust it off on your sleeve and bite. Sweetness. Real, actual sweetness. You close your eyes. For a moment, the world stops being horrifying. Then your tooth cracks, and you swallow a seed that feels like it might colonize your esophagus. Back to reality. On feast days, days when the church pretends generosity is currency, you might be given a proper bowl of pottage. Pottage is the answer to the question, what if soup didn't love you? It's a grayish stew of boiled grain, cabbage, onion, and whatever else can be scrounged. Sometimes it's thick, sometimes it's watery. Always it's vaguely bitter and sometimes tastes of metal. On lucky days, it contains a lump of meat that you do not question. It has already been blessed. You eat. But today is not a feast day. Today is Tuesday, and on Tuesdays the poor eat creatively. You see a man nearby roasting something on a stick over a fire made from broken fence pieces and philosophical despair. You squint. Is it a bird? Yes, a bird. Possibly a sparrow. Possibly something that died of natural causes. He tears the flesh with his teeth and nods at you. You approach. He offers you the charred leg. You accept. The meat is chewy, the skin is blackened, and the flavor is somewhere between burned leather and pride. You savor every bite. You do not ask questions. You finish the evening meal with a sip of ale, begged from a sympathetic washerwoman who saw you cough earlier and mistook you for her brother. You don't correct her. The ale is warm, flat, possibly mostly water. It still burns your throat in a way that makes you feel alive. And that's it. Dinner. You lean against the wall. You exhale. You listen to the town exhale with you. Chimneys huffing smoke, pigs snorting in straw, the sound of cutlery scraping bowls. Somewhere, a child laughs. Somewhere, someone sobs. Somewhere, a goat climbs onto a roof for reasons unknown to man or God. You did it. You ate. You don't feel full, but you feel less empty. Your stomach quiets, your hands stop shaking, your mind begins to drift. Later, you'll pay the price you always do, a bellyache, a suspicious gurgle, the creeping fear that the thing you just ate was already decomposing when you found it. But that's future you's problem. Present you is victorious. You rest your head on your sack, you pat your belly, you pick a small bone out of your teeth, you name it Susan, and you sleep with the knowledge that tomorrow you'll have to do it all over again. But for now, you have survived the evening meal. By the time night edges in like a nosy in-law, the town changes. The air gets colder, the wind sharper, and the whispers louder. Not spoken whispers, spiritual whispers. Because now it's not just about surviving, it's about being seen by your neighbors, by the church, by the saints, and crucially by a God who seems extremely interested in whether or not you touched yourself while eating onions. In the Middle Ages, religion isn't just a belief system. It's the water in the soup, the dirt in the floor, and the reason you got boils last spring. You live in a world where every cough is suspicious, every crop failure is a judgment, and if a goat walks backward, someone's going to burn for it. You shuffle into the main square, not because you're particularly pious, but because not showing up to Vespers is how rumors start. And rumors in this town are just slow-moving execution orders. The church bells ring, loud, uneven, and distinctly resentful. They don't have clocks, but everyone somehow knows it's time to pretend they haven't been sinning all day. You make the sign of the cross, careful to do it the correct way. There are multiple ways to cross yourself, and choosing the wrong one could be interpreted as heresy, witchcraft, or worst of all, foreignness. You enter the chapel. It smells of incense, sweat, and something deeply floral trying to cover both. The walls are stone, cold to the touch, with crude paintings of saints who all look vaguely disappointed in you. The priest begins chanting in Latin, the holy language, which no one understands, but everyone respects because it's in God's favorite accent. You kneel on a board so hard your kneecaps file complaints. You bow your head. You mumble prayers. You try not to fart. You are told to repent. So you do. You confess, silently, to stealing half a turnip, lying about how many lice you've picked today, and thinking impure thoughts about the fishmonger's son who, frankly, knows how to gut a trout. You're sorry, kind of. But you're mostly hungry and tired and cold. You stare up at the crucifix and try to look appropriately miserable. Not too miserable, that's suspicious, but just enough to suggest you understand suffering without actively summoning it. The priest drones on. He talks about sin, hellfire, judgment, and how women who smile too much are probably in league with Satan. You nod solemnly. You look around to make sure no one caught you not nodding. One wrong expression here can be fatal, because your town watches, not just the priest, everyone. The widow 3 doors down reports to the reeve if she sees someone leaving their house too late. The blacksmith's wife once accused a girl of witchcraft because her bread rose too evenly. You heard about a man who got stoned, not with herbs but rocks, because he sneezed during communion and didn't apologize loud enough. Faith is public. So is surveillance. Your salvation depends not only on what you believe, but on how convincingly you believe it, especially in front of Agnes, who hasn't blinked since last Tuesday. After the prayers, the ritual continues. Superstition hour. You exit the chapel and walk home under the weight of dozens of small, ridiculous fears. You avoid the north path. There's a tree where a man once hanged himself, and everyone says it moans in Latin on moonless nights. You spit twice after stepping in manure, to ward off hoof curse, obviously. You clutch your lucky pebble, remember Susan, and whisper a rhyme about boils not returning, just in case. You pass a woman whispering to a cat. The cat hisses at you. You make the sign of the cross again. You pick up your pace. The devil is subtle, but feline. And then there's the matter of dreams. People in your world believe dreams are either divine messages or demonic trickery. There is no in-between. Last week, you dreamed of flying. You told no one. Because if flying dreams get out, someone will accuse you of sorcery, and you do not have the upper body strength for drowning trials. You finally make it back to your home, read slightly less wet box of timber and rats. Before you enter, you knock 3 times, for luck. You sprinkle ashes near the threshold to keep the dead from entering. You whisper a line you half remember from an old chant, something about light and shadows and not letting your soul rot out your ears. Inside, you light a stub of tallow candle, careful not to let it burn too long. Fire is dangerous, also expensive, also potentially demonic if it flickers the wrong way. You settle in, you try to sleep, but your mind dances with every warning you've ever heard. If your left hand itches, you'll lose money. If you hear 3 crows, someone will die. If a baby is born with teeth, it's the Antichrist. If you yawn without covering your mouth, a ghost might crawl in. You cover your mouth, just in case. You pull the blanket to your chin. You whisper a final prayer to St. Jude, St. Michael, Saint that one with the toad, and anyone else who might be listening. You are afraid, not of burglars, not of wolves. You're afraid of screwing up the ritual, of stepping on the wrong twig, looking too long at a crow, or sneezing before breakfast. Because one wrong move, and suddenly you're not just unlucky, you're damned. And here in this quiet little town built on superstition, you don't need a devil. You have neighbors for that. You may be wondering, understandably, whether there is such a thing as fun in the Middle Ages. There is, but only in the sense that being slightly less miserable than usual can be considered a celebration. Let's start with the obvious. You don't have free time. Not in the way modern people do, with their weekends and hobbies and self-care. Your version of self-care is not falling into a latrine. Your version of leisure is sitting down without being kicked. And yet, despite the pain, the poverty, and the pustules, you still find ways to unwind. Because if you didn't, your brain would quietly pack its bags and move into a puddle. This evening, after a long day of carting human excrement, begging for beetle bread, and barely surviving a divine checkup from your leech enthusiast, you limp into the town square for a little leisure. The air is cool. The smell of livestock is less aggressive after sunset. Somewhere someone is playing a lute. Badly. It sounds like a goat arguing with itself. You don't care. It's music, and that alone qualifies it as exotic. There's a small crowd gathered near the stocks. Ah, yes, public punishment, your most reliable form of entertainment. Tonight's offender is a man who stole a loaf of bread, or insulted a priest, or possibly just looked French. The details are vague, and no one really cares. What matters is that he's in the stocks, wrists and neck bound, face exposed, and mouth full of very creative excuses. Children are throwing turnips. Adults are shouting advice. Someone is reading a limerick aloud, and it rhymes with boil. You laugh. Not because it's funny, not really, but because you're not the one in the stocks. That's what passes for comedy now. Relative misfortune. You could have been the one up there. You were, last spring. You still have the splinter scars on your chin. Eventually, someone throws something wet and cabbage-based. The man gags, the crowd cheers. The punishment is over, and you disperse, spiritually uplifted by the suffering of others. Next stop, the tavern. You can't afford a drink, of course, but you can loiter near the doorway, hoping to absorb alcohol through osmosis or inhale the fumes of someone else's buzz. Inside, there's music, this time slightly better. A flute, 2 drums, and a hurdy-gurdy played by a man who hasn't blinked since last week. People are dancing, not gracefully. This is medieval dancing. More stomping than swaying, more sweating than grace. But the joy is real, and the beer has erased enough memories to make everything feel soft at the edges. You clap along from outside, you smile, someone throws a crust at your feet, you eat it. Then comes the storytelling. A man named Wulfric stands atop a barrel and begins spinning tales of dragons, saints, and mysterious women who live in wells and whisper secrets about cows. The crowd hushes. Eyes widen. The magic of oral tradition fills the space between the filth and the fleas. You love this part. Because when Wulfric speaks, the world bends. Suddenly, you're not a beggar with lice and splinters. You're a knight, a hero, a witness to miracles. He tells a tale about a man who stole the moon, baked it into a pie, and fed it to a bishop. The moral is unclear. Possibly something about greed, possibly something about seasoning. You don't care. You are wrapped. Around the edge of the crowd, someone's roasting chestnuts. You breathe in the smoky sweetness and pretend it's yours. The man next to you farts audibly. You pretend it isn't. And then there are games, but not games with rules or consistency or safety. These are medieval games, like Catch the Pig, self-explanatory. The pig is smarter than the players. Hot Thumb, in which you pass around a glowing coal and pretend it's not burning you. Knucklebones, dice-like gambling using sheep bones. You once won a radish. Look at the sky and name that cloud. Frequently ends in theological debate. You join a group squatting in the dirt, playing something that might be chess, but definitely involves mud and passive aggression. No one wins. Everyone leaves with sore thighs and vague resentment. A success. Nearby, a man juggles eggs. Everyone is amazed. He drops one. It explodes. A child screams. The crowd applauds. And then there's gossip. Gossip is the true lifeblood of leisure. It is free, fast, and sometimes fatal. You overhear, the miller's wife is pregnant. Again. But the miller's been away. The reeve was seen sneezing, twice, in the same day. Someone found a frog in the font. It blinked in Latin. Old Maud's cat spoke, in tongues. Or maybe it was just coughing. You contribute your own morsel. I saw the blacksmith pick his nose with tongs. It's a lie. But it's funny, and no one questions it. This is fun. This is what passes for recreation when your survival rate hovers just above maybe. You remember laughter. Not your own, someone else's. Bright, shrill, human. It echoes off the damp walls, and for a moment things almost feel normal, warm, alive. Then a fight breaks out over a chicken. Two men shouting. One throws a stool, the other grabs a broom. The chicken escapes, the townsfolk cheer. You clap. Nothing brings a community together like mild violence over poultry. Finally the bell tolls. Not the church bell, a smaller one, handheld, rung by a boy walking the streets shouting, "Time to go." It's the medieval equivalent of last call. The crowd disperses. People stagger home. Someone sings. Someone cries. Someone urinates into a drain while praying. You walk slowly, letting the night air cool your sweat. You survived another day. You even laughed. You even felt something other than hunger and cold and fear. And that's the real miracle. Not healing, not sainthood, but joy, however brief, however muddy, in a world that forgot your name. You reach your hovel. You sit, you scratch your knee, you yawn, you smile. Because in the Middle Ages, fun is what happens just before the rats reclaim the night. Love. It's a warm, glowing concept in stories, a promise of connection, the flutter of anticipation, the slow bloom of two hearts finding each other across a crowded room. Not here. Here, love is a transaction, courtship is a logistical negotiation, and passion is what happens when your pig escapes and runs straight into the reeve's cabbage garden. Welcome to romance in the Middle Ages. It starts not with a flirtatious glance or witty banter, but with property. Specifically, who owns what and how much of it they're willing to trade in exchange for a spouse with a functioning spine and at least one eye. If you're lucky, and I mean truly blessed by 3 saints and a minor relic, you'll get to marry someone your family chooses for you. If you're unlucky, the decision is made by a local noble. Your master if you're a servant, or the church if they think you've sinned enough to need holy supervision. As a beggar, of course, your romantic prospects are, let's say, limited. You are what scholars refer to as maritally undesirable. But that doesn't stop you from looking. You watch from your spot on the cobbled steps as a baker's daughter walks by. She smells like yeast and hope. She has a smudge of flour on her cheek. Your stomach growls. It's unclear if it's for her or the bread. You nod. She doesn't look at you. That's fair. You have hay in your hair, and your tunic is hosting several fleas named Harold. Still, one can dream. Let's imagine for a moment that you do have romantic options. How does one flirt, medieval style? Well, you can't write poetry. You can't read. You can't afford flowers. The last time you tried to pluck a daisy for someone, a goose bit you. So you do what everyone else does. You grunt in her direction. You offer a slightly less moldy crust of bread. You mention casually that your lice are almost gone. And if she grunts back? Wedding bells. But don't get excited, because courtship is rarely about love. It's about dowries, land, herding capability, how many children your pelvis can reasonably launch before collapsing. Women in particular have a very specific role in romance. Be fertile, be quiet, and ideally be slightly smaller than your husband's ego. Marriage age? Anywhere between 12 and she looks tall enough. A girl might be wed before she knows what a kiss is. Her family will nod proudly while her husband, usually a man twice her age, with the emotional depth of a chamber pot, grins over a pig leg. Romantic, no? Let's talk about the wedding. It's not a dreamy ceremony with white dresses and coordinated bridesmaids. It's a legal contract shouted over pigs, possibly in a barn. There is ale. There is bread. There is a man playing a drum with his feet. And then there is the bedding ceremony. Yes, that's real. After the vows are spoken and the ale has flowed, the newlyweds are escorted loudly to bed by their friends and family, who may or may not stay to make sure the marriage is, shall we say, legally binding. Nothing says romance like your aunt chanting a fertility prayer while you fumble with woolen underwear. And once you're married, you stay married. There's no divorce. There's no conscious uncoupling. There's, you live together until one of you dies from plague, childbirth, or falling into a well while drunk. You want to leave? Good luck. The church frowns upon it, society gossips about it, and your mother will curse you in 3 dialects. Adultery? Common. Forgiven if you're male. Punished if you're female. Love is gendered, heavily surveilled, and often completely absent. Still, people find ways to care, to connect, to pretend that what they have is affection, rather than arrangement. You've seen it. The woman who slips her husband a piece of dried apple. The man who stays up all night with his wife when her foot boils return. The couple that holds hands while watching someone else get punished for having hands at all. Love exists, but it is tired. It hides behind duty. It sneaks out after dark. It whispers, I brought you a beetle because it reminded me of you. Now let's address the awkward elephant in the room, sex. Oh yes, you thought we'd skip it? We never skip the sad parts. In your world, sex is rarely private, barely hygienic, and deeply, deeply regulated by the church. Certain positions are sinful, certain days are forbidden. You can't do it on Fridays or Sundays or during Lent, or if you sneeze too hard that morning. The church says sex is for procreation only, which means pleasure is discouraged and talking about it is practically treason. Still, people do it. Because people always do. In barns, in beds, in forests, in corners where the candlelight doesn't reach and nobody's counting how many toes are involved. You try not to think too hard about it, because your own experience is minimal. There was a moment once, a girl named Elspeth. She had a crooked tooth and a laugh like spilled cider. She offered you half her turnip once. You still dream about it, but then she married a wheelwright and moved 3 villages away. You heard she has 5 children now. You hope she's happy. You hope her turnips are still generous. And so you lie under your scratchy blanket, listening to the sounds of the town settling, cartwheels slowing, dogs barking, someone cursing about a misplaced shoe. You close your eyes. Love is a luxury here, but so is everything else. Still, sometimes when you see 2 people glance at each other just a little longer than usual, or when someone shares the last bite of cheese, or when a hand brushes a shoulder and lingers half a second too long, you smile. Because even here, in this place of cold mud and colder rules, people still try. And that's as romantic as it gets. Children. You'd think they'd be a source of light in a world this bleak. Tiny bundles of laughter and potential toddling through the mud in woolen sacks. But in the Middle Ages, childhood isn't a phase of life. It's more of a brief legal misunderstanding. You don't get to be a child for very long. In fact, you don't get to be anything at all unless you're old enough to hold a bucket, chase a pig, or be yelled at for sneezing too loud near a priest. Your first memory might be warmth, from a fire, a mother's chest, or a goat sleeping too close. But not long after that, someone hands you a chore. You are, by age 5, a functioning member of society. And by functioning, we mean your job is to not die before lunch, fetch water without dropping it, and try not to set anything valuable on fire. Today you see a boy no older than 7 dragging a bundle of sticks through the mud. His face is grim. His shirt is a repurposed sack. His fingers are raw from splinters. This is Timothy, and his official title is child laborer, with high hopes and low odds. Timothy delivers firewood, shoos chickens from the baker's porch, and is occasionally used as bait for feral cats. He gets paid in crumbs and shoulder slaps. This is considered generous. Another child, a girl named Millie, spends her day spinning wool. She is 8. Her fingers are permanently stained from dye. She hums a lullaby while working, though it sounds more like a threat. She doesn't go to school, because there is no school. Not for her, not for most. Education is a luxury, a cloistered, Latin-speaking, quill-dipping, God-fearing luxury. Monks learn, noble boys learn. Sometimes noble girls learn if their fathers are feeling whimsical and heresy-resistant. But for the rest, your curriculum is don't fall in the well, don't eat the soap, don't anger the priest, and never, under any circumstance, ask questions. You might learn to count, if counting has anything to do with chickens. You might learn to write your name if you can convince someone to show you how to make a letter. But mostly, you learn by being yelled at. Yelled at by adults, yelled at by older children, and occasionally yelled at by pigs who are simply done with your nonsense. Toys? Oh, sweet summer listener. There are no toys, not in the way you know them. There are rocks, sticks, mud, your imagination, which is quickly beaten out of you. Some children whittle little dolls from bones or wood scraps. Some tie rags into knots and call them horses. Some play tag, though it's just called chase, and it ends when someone falls into a dung heap and cries. You once saw 2 children playing execution. One pretended to be a thief, the other hit him with a ladle until a priest made them stop. Not because it was violent, but because they were using the good ladle. Children are expected to be useful. By 10, most boys are apprenticed. By 12, girls are married. By 14, if you're not dead, you're just short and underfed, but otherwise indistinguishable from an adult. And yet, they still laugh. You see it, you hear it. That bark of joy when someone farts during prayer. The cackle when someone throws a beet at the Reeves' back and gets away with it. The delighted scream of a child who finds a frog and names it Saint Harold the Moist. There's play, even if no one calls it that. And there's affection, too. It's rough and fast and hidden in the crevices of daily drudgery. A mother braiding her daughter's hair with twine and muttering stories about witches who live in barrels. A father giving his son half a carrot and pretending it's a feast. A sibling wiping someone else's nose without spitting first. That's love here. Tenderness exists, it's just feral. But danger is everywhere. Children die, often, easily, from falling off a cart, drinking ditch water, eating a berry that looked too enthusiastic, or just breathing near someone with a mysterious cough. Infant mortality is so high that babies are sometimes named after dead siblings, as if family names were being passed down like boots with holes. You knew a woman who lost 4 sons. She just kept naming the next one John, as if daring the universe to keep trying. It did. She stopped at 7. No one cried much, not because they didn't care, but because grief is a full-time job, and there are already turnips to peel. When children die, they're buried quickly, sometimes wrapped in linen, sometimes just placed beneath the garden with a stone. The priest says a few words, then life continues, because it has to, because mourning, like everything else, is rationed. But every now and then, something sacred happens. You see 2 children holding hands. You see one give the other a crust of bread without being asked. You see a girl tuck her doll, a bent spoon with a rag dress, under her blanket at night. You see a boy coughing and thin, still managing to whistle a tune while helping his father carry bricks. You see hope, fragile and ridiculous and loud. And it shakes you, because you remember, briefly, what it was like to be that small. To believe that if you just wished hard enough, the mud would turn into pudding, and your mother wouldn't cry behind the shed. You remember wanting, and in a world that teaches you from birth to expect nothing. That memory is its own tiny act of rebellion. There's a warm snuffling at your foot, something soft, something whiskered. You don't panic, you don't scream, you certainly don't shoo it away, because it might be your pet, or your dinner, or your landlord, depending on how long it's lived under your blanket. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where the concept of pet is a fluid, often disease-adjacent thing, and the line between friend and pest is drawn in mud and rewritten nightly. Let's begin with the working animals. These are the animals people like, or at least tolerate, because they earn their place. You've got Dogs, not the fluffy, groomed anxiety pillows of the modern world, but lean, alert, slightly traumatized canines who earn their meals by herding sheep, guarding doors, and chasing away anything smaller than a badger. Your neighbor has one named Ralph. Ralph has one ear, no tail, and a bark that could curdle milk. You once saw him stare down a monk. The monk blinked first. Cats, technically tolerated, never trusted. Cats exist on their own terms. They catch mice. They keep the rat population manageable, and in return they demand nothing, except occasional warmth, mild worship, and the legal right to sleep on your chest whether you're breathing or not. Some say they're witches' familiars. Others say they're just jerks with whiskers. Both are probably true. Horses, if you're rich, so, not you. Horses are valuable, majestic beasts that live lives of relative luxury, stables, oats, grooming. You've touched a horse once. It was majestic. It sneezed on you. You cried. Donkeys and mules, the real workhorses. Stubborn, flat-eyed, overburdened, and deeply unimpressed by everything. They carry firewood, water, sacks of grain, small children, large turnips, and occasionally people who think they're more important than they are. Your uncle had a mule named Godfrey who once kicked a bishop. He was your favorite uncle. Chickens. Half food, half alarm system, all chaos. They lay eggs sometimes, scream for no reason, and will eat anything, including other chickens. You admire their honesty. Pigs. Delightfully intelligent, always muddy, and vaguely demonic if you catch them at the wrong angle. Pigs are prized but not trusted. You've seen a pig open a latch. You've seen a pig eat a shoe. You've seen a pig stare directly into someone's soul. They're not pets. They're co-workers you don't want to talk to in the break room. Now let's discuss the unofficial pets. These are animals you didn't invite into your life, but who arrived anyway. Like Oswald, your rat. He lives in your bedding. You've tried to evict him. He returned. You gave up. Now you occasionally share crumbs, and in return, he only bites you once a week. He has a personality. He prefers barley to oats. He hates the church bell. He once chased away a beetle trying to move in. He's family now. You don't question it. The mouse in the wall. No name. Just a presence. You hear it scratching at night. Sometimes you whisper stories to it. You're not sure it listens, but it hasn't left, and in this world that counts as loyalty. The goat that lives 3 doors down. You don't own her, but she wanders into your alley every third day, chews on your sleeve, and makes a noise that sounds like someone dying slowly in a vat of porridge. You pet her anyway. Her fur is coarse, but warm. She never judges you. Now, on to vermin. Because in the Middle Ages, vermin aren't a pest problem. They're a permanent lifestyle feature. There are fleas, your oldest companions. They live in your clothes, your bedding, your soul. You scratch constantly. You squish them between fingernails. You once held a flea funeral for one particularly large specimen who'd been with you since spring. Lice, little white demons that set up colonies on your scalp and throw blood raves every night. You've shaved your head before. They came back. You've bathed in vinegar. They sang through it. You've accepted them now. They're part of you. Like a second, itchier personality. Bedbugs. So small, so smug. They leave trails of bites like Morse code for suffer. You sometimes sleep standing up to avoid them. They laugh. You hear them. Cockroaches. Immortal. Indestructible. Often mistaken for sentient thumb bones. You once stepped on one barefoot and questioned your place in the cosmos for days. Flies, not just insects, symbols of the divine plague economy. They gather in clouds around anything remotely edible. Your food, your face, your feelings. They are everywhere, all the time. You once swallowed one mid-prayer. You finish the prayer anyway. You try to set traps. You try to seal your belongings. You try to scream them away. But the truth is, they outnumber you. They've seen your secrets. They've crawled into your thoughts. They know you, and in their own parasitic, unforgiving way, they love you. Then there are the blurry in-betweens, creatures that fall somewhere between pet, threat, and rumored omen. Like toads, slimy little miracles. Some say they cure illness, others say they bring it. You kept one once in a wooden bowl, named him Gregory. He disappeared. You found him 3 weeks later in your shoe. You screamed. He didn't. You reconciled. Crows, ominous, elegant, and smarter than most people you know. 3 crows means death. 2 crows means a message. 1 crow staring at you for an hour without blinking means probably something very bad. You salute crows when you see them, just in case. Bees, precious, protected, dangerous. Beekeepers are considered half mystic, half crazy. You once stole a bit of honey, got stung, felt alive, would do it again. In all of this, what you begin to realize is that in the medieval world, animals are your neighbors. Some love you, some loathe you, some ignore you until you're dead, at which point they will eat your face without hesitation. But they are here, in your home, on your lap, inside your soup. And when the nights are cold, and the wind howls through the slats in your hovel, and the lice are scratching lullabies into your scalp, you reach out. And maybe you find Oswald. Maybe you find the goat. Maybe you find the warmth of a chicken who fell asleep too close. And in that moment, you're not alone, just cohabiting with creatures who haven't figured out how disappointing you are. Yet, you wake up to the sound of wind trying to tear your roof off like it's mad at you personally. Which, in a way, it is. Because in the Middle Ages, weather isn't just atmospheric, it's personal. The sky hates you, the clouds hate you. The sun, when it shows up, does so to mock your squinting. There are no forecasts, no barometers, no apps telling you to bring an umbrella. There is only instinct, superstition, and the wisdom of your neighbor who swears her knees know when it's going to rain, but also insists owls are a sign of the devil. You sit up under your half blanket, look through your cracked parchment window, and contemplate your options. There is no good weather. There is only different flavors of suffering. Let's start with what you're currently experiencing. Cold, wet, windy. The kind of wind that doesn't just blow, it slaps, right in the face, like it knows you didn't finish your prayers last night. The rain doesn't pour, it dribbles, constantly. It weeps from the heavens like a disappointed parent. Not dramatic enough to feel satisfying, just enough to soak through your tunic and make your underlayer cling in ways that suggest betrayal. And it's not just wet, it's penetrating. It finds seams, it gets under hats, it ruins cheese. Your shoes, which you've tried to patch with pig gut and divine hope, are now small boats of disappointment. The mud sucks at your feet like it wants to make you part of the road. The streets become rivers of sludge and shame. You once saw a man try to jump a puddle. He disappeared. We don't talk about it. Now let's pivot to summer. Oh yes, don't be fooled. It may sound lovely in theory. Sunshine, warmth, less mold on your ceiling. Except no. Summer in the medieval world is just rot turned up to 11. Your clothes cling like guilt. Your skin breaks out in suspicious rashes. The communal sweat of every townsperson becomes airborne. And the flies don't visit, they move in. Every open pot is a buffet. Every bite of food includes a leg, possibly your own. The water, formerly refreshing, is now a stew of algae and livestock opinion. You drink it anyway, because the alternative is heat stroke. Sunburns? Common? Sunscreen? Try goose fat, or mud, or nothing at all. You once smeared pig lard on your arms to block the sun. It worked, until the dog licked it off. Summer is also when disease blossoms, boils, rashes, mystery fevers. Everything festers faster, smells get stronger, pits get dug. You pray for winter, until it comes. And winter, oh sweet listener, is not a season. It's a curse, a long, dark, bone-snapping trial that lasts 3 times longer than it should. Frost creeps into your bones, your fingers stop working. Your nose runs until it freezes. You once saw a man blink and his eyelids stuck together. You burn anything you can, wood, straw, old furniture, written apologies, just to get through the night. If you're lucky, you have a fire. If you're unlucky, you have a blanket with a hole and a rat named Oswald who refuses to share. There's ice on the inside of your walls. You huddle in a pile with whatever human or beast won't bite you. You don't move unless you have to, because moving makes noise. And noise makes wind find you. You try to sleep, but the cold whispers. It says you got to patch the hole in your boot. You didn't chop enough wood. You're one sneeze away from St. Peter. Even spring, that allegedly hopeful season, is a lie. All it brings is mud, thick, soupy, foot-sucking mud. It oozes, it clings, it laughs. Your garden tries to grow but mostly produces resentment and slugs. Oh, and floods, because the river, after being frozen for 4 months, decides to reintroduce itself all at once. You lose 3 turnips, your only fork, and a cat who may or may not have been yours. But what about the sky, you ask? It changes constantly. It lies. 1 minute, blue and cloudless. The next, hail, sideways, with a chance of did someone just get struck? Lightning is interpreted as God's wrath, or your neighbor's sins, or your own if you're particularly unlucky that day. You once saw a tree explode. No one was surprised. And when the fog rolls in, it stays. Thick as soup. Quiet as a conspiracy. People walk into wells. Cows vanish. Someone claimed they saw a saint. Someone else just bumped into a cart. The fog is omniscient and petty. And yet, weather dictates everything. You plan your labor around it. You plan your meals, your prayers, your insults. You time your sins carefully. Don't fornicate during storms, lest the heavens hear you. You store your food by the cycles of frost. You judge your neighbors by how well they thatch their roofs. You've developed a relationship with the sky. It is abusive, but also necessary, because weather is the one thing that treats everyone equally. Lord or beggar, monk or thief, the rain still soaks you, the wind still cuts, the sun still burns the backs who kneel in the fields. You curse it, you fear it, but you know it. And in a world that changes little from year to year, decade to decade, generation to generation, weather is drama, it is danger. It is the closest thing to a plot twist your life allows. So you rise, wrap yourself in your soaked tunic and face the drizzle once more. Because no matter what season it is, the forecast is always the same. Unforgiving. The light fades, not just in the sky, which bleeds from gray to black with all the subtlety of spilled ink, but in your bones too. It's not dramatic, not cinematic, just slow. A quiet resignation, like a candle reaching its final sigh. The town softens with the dusk. Chimneys puff smoke that smells of burnt turnip and desperation. Windows flicker with firelight, casting orange halos around warped panes. The market packs away its meager offerings. The dogs return to their corners. The cats, as always, go where they please. You feel it settle in your joints, the weight of another day survived. Not conquered, not enjoyed, just survived. And in this world, that's enough. You crawl into your makeshift bedding, damp, scratchy, lumpy in all the wrong places, and lay flat, watching your breath fog in the cold. Oswald the rat returns, curls against your leg, and dreams whatever rats dream. Breadcrumbs, escape, betrayal. You don't have a pillow, just a folded tunic that smells like outside. You close your eyes. But sleep doesn't come quickly. Because here in the quiet, when the town is silent and the wind has stopped snickering, you remember, everyone is dying. Not urgently, not dramatically, just inevitably. Death isn't a surprise here. It's a neighbor, a presence, a long, boring inevitability. People die of everything. They die of coughs, they die of blisters. They die of sneezing near the wrong person during Lent. Sometimes they just stop, at dinner, on the road, mid-conversation. You once saw a man die while relieving himself behind the butcher's shop. No one moved the body for 3 hours. It wasn't disrespect, just scheduling. When people die, it's fast and underexplained. She had a chill. He saw a bad omen. God took her. The blood was sour. A crow followed him for 3 days. You hear stories constantly. Of whole families wiped out in a week. Of children born already dying. Of that one guy who lived to 50 and became a local legend. Death is everywhere. Not scary, exactly. Just normal. It's in your soup. It's in your bed. It's in that mysterious rash you haven't shown anyone, because if you do, you'll end up being bled by a man who also sharpens knives for fun. Even now you cough. Just once. A tight, dry cough that echoes a little too loud. You listen to your chest. You count your breaths. You pretend you're fine. Because you have to. Because there are no doctors, only barbers with bad aim. And so you lay there, cataloging your pain like bedtime prayer. Knees, aching. Stomach, growling. Tooth, loose. Hope, flickering, but still technically lit. You're not afraid of death. You just don't want it tonight. You still have half a crust left. You haven't checked on Millie. You think the moon looked especially smug earlier, and you'd like to see it lose. But if it does come, if you do close your eyes and never open them again, then your death will be handled just like your life. Efficiently, quietly, cheaply. You'll be wrapped in a sheet, if available, or a rug, or just dirt, really, buried in the parish plot. No gravestone. Maybe a cross, if the priest isn't mad at you. Your possessions, a spoon, a rock, a questionable cup, will be redistributed, which is a nice way of saying someone else will use them without asking. Oswald will move on, probably to your neighbor, whose feet are warmer. And the world will continue, unchanged, unmoved, unbothered, but not unmarked. Because you were here. You begged, you laughed, you bled a little, you danced once, badly, you ate things that shouldn't be eaten, you survived longer than you were supposed to. And in this place, this damp, crumbling, parasite-laden world, that matters. You shift beneath your blanket. Outside, the wind howls again. A cartwheel creaks in the distance, someone coughs, far off, someone prays, and then the town sleeps. You close your eyes, and maybe, just maybe, you dream of warmth, of fresh bread, of a world without leeches or lice or aggressive goats. And if not, if you wake up in the morning with the same sore joints and the same rock in your shoe, then you get up and you do it all again, because death is waiting. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, you live. You've made it. Not bad for someone who's slept through half of it. The fire's burned to embers now. The voices, the footsteps, the strange old smells, they've all slipped into silence. You're back in your own time, though your dreams might take longer to catch up. No need to open your eyes. Just float here a little longer. You've earned a quiet ending. Same time tomorrow? I'll keep the map warm.